Welcome all to Storytime with the Sassafras Kids, presented by the Dr. James Still Historic Site Association. We thank you for joining us today. Today's Storytime book will be covering the William Still and His Freedom Stories, The Father of the Underground Railroad, written by Don Tate. So again, welcome to Storytime with the Sassafras Kids.
I'm telling y'all, my people party on Underground Railroad. Y'all don't know about that.
Sure.
No. What? I'm telling you, the Underground Railroad. My uncle, William Still, I'm telling you. He was the man. He worked with Harriet Tubman. Yeah. Y'all just ignorant. Yeah. Y'all just ignorant. Where you from? Where you from? Huh? I'm from the fields of New Jersey. Yeah, you look like it. Yeah, I know. Now, where you from? I'm from Jersey, man. Pass it down. I'm from Motown. Pass it back. Stop touching me, man. Whoop, whoop. Bing bong.
Leave my hair alone. Cassie was black.
Her hair bigger than yours. Look at all the hair on her. What?
What you hit me for?
Because she started it.
Wait a minute. Wait, what's going on here? What?
How you doing, Mr. Sequoia? Did you get your apple today?
I most certainly did get apples. Thank you so much. You are so sweet, Sam.
See, she knows. She knows.
So now listen, I heard all that banter out in the hallway. And there is a story of Sam's family. There is a real story. Let's check it out. William Still and His Freedom Stories, the father of the Underground Railroad. Everybody take a deep breath. Let's talk. This story begins at a time when the United States was split into two. The North, Black people were free. In the South, they were enslaved by whites. Slavery was a nightmare. Back-breaking work under the scorching sun, threats of lashing, or worse, no pay. Children were separated from their mamas and papas, brothers and sisters, sold away at auction, never to be seen again.
Wow.
Sometime during the 1700s, Levin and Sidney Still were held captive in Maryland Farm, forced to work. Their 4 children were too. The family yearned to live free.
That's my people.
I will die before I submit to the yoke, Levin told the man who enslaved him. The two came to an agreement. Levin was allowed to work over hours, actually receiving a small income. With the money he earned, Levin purchased his freedom. But freedom wasn't always fair, especially to Black people. Could a free Black man remain in the South? Levin must have wondered. But he be enslaved again. No chancing that, Levin bid his family goodbye with a plan to return to rescue them later. In a blink, he bolted north. Sidney wasn't so fortunate. There was no opportunity for her or the children to purchase their freedom. They remained behind, enslaved, a separation Sidney could not endure. Torn and tormented, she whispered a parting prayer to her 2 sons, who were big and strong enough to fend for themselves. Then she escaped with the 2 girls. Sidney reunited with her husband on the pine woods near Washington Township in New Jersey. Now they were together, free as wind. They changed their last name from Steele, to Still, to throw slave catchers off. Their new life was good, but living ached like an open sore. Levin and Sidney longed for the 2 sons they had left behind. Over the years, the family grew. Now there were 15 children, 15 mouths to feed. Oh, how they struggled Money was tight, food was scarce, shoes, if any, were handed down. In 1821, the youngest son was born. Sunlit eyes, mahogany skin, they named him William. He grew quick as a weed. 8 years later, a neighbor was attacked late one night. The man had once been enslaved in the South. He escaped and found peace in the pines. Slave catchers tracked the man down. They thrashed him, cuffed his arms, beat him badly. Thankfully, the man escaped again, but he needed help, and soon. The greedy men were still on the prowl. The neighbors called on William. The young boy knew every nook and cranny of the woods. William led the man to safety, some 20 miles away. The experience defined the rest of his life. William's father ruled the roost. His rules, chores were priority. Education was not. Schooling had to wait for rainy days when the ground was too soggy for work. William looked forward to sharpening his mind, but attending class was not easy walking the woods. The North might have been free, but free was not always fair, especially for Black people.
What do you look like? What do you look like? Oh, man.
Here he goes. One day, on a walk home after school, white kids pushed William over the side of a bridge. They laughed. William plunged into the water. Eventually, William's father pulled him out of school. Learning to read would have to wait a few seasons. Three winters later, conditions had improved. William returned to class when he was 17. He was there by sunrise, home after dusk. He studied spelling, defining words, practiced enunciation, learned math. Before long, he knew how to write. One wintry evening, warmed by the fire, William grasped his favorite newspaper, The Colored American, an anti-slavery newspaper. It was owned and published by Black people. They published stories that protested discrimination against Black people in the North. They printed stories. They encouraged emancipation of slaves in the South. The newspaper made William recall his parents' stories about slavery, stories about escape, stories about his older brothers left behind to suffer in bondage. William shouldered these stories in the next chapter of his life. By age 23, William craved more excitement, as any young man would. Life in the pines moved as slow as a snail. Might the big city bring bigger opportunities? In 1844, he decided to find out. With $3 in his pocket and $1 billion in pride, William planted himself north of the Delaware River in East Philadelphia. First things first, he needed a job and a roof over his head. Neither came readily. For 3 long years, William bounced from low-paying job to low-paying job. He threshed clamshells, hauled wood, laid bricks, and peeled oysters, dug wells, hawked clothes. He worked on a dock, then a hotel, barely earning the smell of money. Long, cold winters, grumbling belly, no decent place to lay his head, not as glamorous as the life he had imagined. But then a newspaper arose. The Pennsylvania Anti-Slavery Society needed an office clerk. The pay was disappointingly low, but the job might have led William straight to the most prominent anti-slavery organization in the area. With a foot in the door, maybe he could help enslaved people escape from the South. Reluctantly, he accepted the job. "I go for liberty and improvement," William wrote in a letter to his new employers. In his new job, William sorted mail, emptied trash, swept office floors until his arms ached. Not quite what he had hoped. William's employers were doing the work he hoped to do. They were abolitionists.
Nosy man.
They were abolitionists who spoke loudly against slavery. They sponsored meetings, signed petitions, published newspapers. William worked hard beyond his office duties. He earned his employers' trust, gained their respect, their loyalty. He climbed higher and higher until one day he became the manager. At that time, freedom-speaking people were drawn to Pennsylvania like a magnet. It was the nearest free city to the slave-holding South. They arrived daily by the dozens, passengers on a secret network called the Underground Railroad. Freedom-seeking men and women, young and old and in between, running, hiding, praying. They traveled from house to church, river to swamp, stop to stop to stop. It was dangerous. It was a top secret journey from slavery to freedom. The passengers who arrived in Philadelphia were tired. They were sick and hungry, cut up, broken, marred and marred, frantic, fearful, and fed up, but hopeful. William sought these travelers out and welcomed them into his home, which was now a station on the Underground Railroad.
Wow. Underground Railroad.
One evening, an unexpected passenger arrived at his office. The man was middle-aged, stooped back, furrowed brow, threadbare clothes. His name was Peter. He was looking for his mother, his family. Peter recounted his story. William listened in awe. Turned out, Peter had been enslaved in the South for more than 40 years. He'd gotten away. Now he wanted to find his family who had escaped before him. Peter recalled the names of his parents, Levin and Sidney. He named one of his brothers, Levin. William was thunderstruck. Could this man be his Peter, his long lost but never forgotten older brother? Yes, he was. But Peter was confused by William's news. Was this some kind of trick to capture and return him to the South? He needed some convincing. From a mother who looked just like him. Peter's story was sad, tragic, miraculous, and extraordinary, and Peter's story restored his family. Could other people's stories reunite other families torn apart by slavery?
Picture of his mom?
Yes, it is. That's his mom.
That's my people.
From that point forward, William recorded every detail about each and every freedom seeker who had passed through his home or office. He recorded their names, their ages. Was it a boy? Was it a girl? Was it a man? Was it a woman? The hue of their skin, copper, dark, chestnut, dark brown, light skin. What were they? Who had enslaved them? Where did they come from? Where were they going? It wasn't his job to do so, but William thought these written records might help somebody. William's hard work didn't go unannounced. He climbed higher and higher at the Anti-Slavery Society, becoming the leader of the committee assigned to help freedom-seeking people. William corresponded with other agents on the Underground Railroad. He conducted interviews, counted money. He planned the rescues of freedom-seeking people, but his work did not stop there. William also recorded the stories of people seeking freedom on his line of the Underground Railroad. In many ways, this was his most important work. William and Ellen Craft, a married couple, escaped slavery in Georgia. Traveling on first-class trains, they stayed in the best hotels and dined with steamboat captains, all in disguise. Fair-skinned Ellen passed as a white man. Her husband pretended to be her slave. A man enslaved in Virginia climbed into a wooden crate and had himself shipped 28 hours to freedom, earning his name Henry Box Brown.
My man, Box Brown. Beatbox.
And on several nights, freedom-seeking people passed through Williams' line of the Underground Railroad network, led by Harriet Moses Tubman herself,
Told you.
who had gone into the belly of the South to rescue them.
Told you.
Williams' committee provided them with money and replaced their worn shoes. Williams' work grew 2, 3, 4 times as long. His records helped reunite families torn apart by slavery to find each other once they'd found freedom. But when enslaved people escaped, their Southern enslavers lost money. They demanded new laws. In 1850, the Fugitive Slave Act was enacted. It required the return of runaways who had been captured, even if they had found their way to freedom. People living in free states where slavery was outlawed were forced to cooperate with the law or be brutally punished. The Fugitive Slave Act resulted in the kidnapping of free black people by greedy slave catchers and federal agents. No black person, free or not, north or south, was safe. Williams' work now put him in great danger. His records were evidence of crimes committed. William had a plan. He bundled his records, all those stories, and placed them where no one could think to look, in the back of a cemetery, inside a dark vault, among the rats and the dead.
Rats.
Yeah. The laws were meant to shut down the Underground Railroad, but shut it down, they could not. In Pennsylvania and New York, Michigan and Vermont, black people, black neighborhoods, black churches drove the Underground Railroad full steam north, carrying freedom-seeking people straight into Canada, known as Freedom's Land, where they would be safe. Williams' work at Anti-Slavery Society was outstanding. But after 14 long years, he made barely any more money than he had the day he started. Helping freedom seekers was his passion, but passion did not put food on the table for his growing family. It was time for a change. William resigned from his job at the Anti-Slavery Society. He started a coal business. In 1860, the United States was bitterly divided over the issue of slavery. War broke out. Many people died. In 1861, a new president was enacted. Could Abraham Lincoln reunite the country? Would he choose freedom or slavery? In time, Lincoln did the right thing. He chose freedom. Williams' coal business thrived in the shadow of the Civil War. By the 1870s, he was one of the richest black men of his time. But even now, life was still not always fair, especially to black people. William used his power and influence to help. Black children had been excluded from the YMCA, so William helped to start a branch for them. Black people had been forbidden from riding Philadelphia city streetcars, so William protested and won. In 1872, he published his book, The Underground Railroad, a collection of stories of hardship and hairbreadth escapes. William Still's records and the stories he preserved reunited families torn apart by slavery, because that is what stories can do. Protest injustice, soothe, teach, inspire, connect. Stories save lives. William's stories needed to be told, so slavery's nightmare will never happen again.
Told you, that's my people.
So there we have the story of
that.
some of the Still family.
See, told you.
Okay.
My people,
Yes.
my people saving people. What y'all doing?
Okay, so I'm sure that their families have a story too. And I bet if we go back and look at William Still Stories, we might find stories of their families as well. See, wasn't just your family, it was everybody's family.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you guys have any questions? I know you've got lots of questions. Yes.
How many people were saved?
Well, on the Underground Railroad, during William's time, he has 800 stories of 800 people being saved. But I'm sure there was an enormous amount of people who escaped the Underground Railroad to freedom. Because even before he started his book, there were people who left, who escaped to freedom.
Okay.
Yes.
That's right. Who did they say was the president back then?
Well, Abraham Lincoln, he emancipated slavery, yes.
Oh, Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln. Yes.
When did he decide he wanted to write all these stories?
Well, he decided he wanted to do that because there was a story to tell. Everybody had a story. And then he was able to connect people. He said, okay, if they were looking for someone, they would go back and look up, see what they look like, see where they were, see where their previous slave owners were. So these were tracing facts. They could find out where they were and where they came from. So they could connect them to their family. Good questions, guys.
Did he keep his stories in the office with him?
Well, he did keep them in the office, but he had to hide them because if the slave owners came and they started looking around, they'd have all this documentation of all these people and they would know where to trace them back to. So no, he had to hide those records.
Take them back.
And he had to keep them someplace where no one else would find them.
So where was Harriet at? Harriet Tubman.
Harriet was working on the railroad. She was going back and forth, shipping people back and forth until she couldn't do it anymore. And then other people took over, moving that Underground Railroad. Yes, sir.
What is that? How do you say it? An abolitionist?
An abolitionist. Okay, an abolitionist is a person who works towards abolishing something. So these particular people were working towards abolishing slavery. If you look at that word, the word abolish is in the front of the word abolitionist. Abolish,
So
get
William-
rid of.
So William
They wanted
Still
to
was an
get-
abolitionist.
Yes, William Still was an abolitionist, yes.
So we
So, Sam, is there anything that you'd like to tell us about your family?
Well, what I've been told that William Still was quite an entrepreneur. He started the first YMCA, the first black YMCA on Christian Street in Philadelphia. He started the first black bank called the Berean Bank. He was a founder of an orphanage for black children in Philadelphia. And when he died in 1902, the New York Times proclaimed him to be the father of the Underground Railroad. And that's how important that he was in the city of Philadelphia, y'all. He was a mover. He was a civil rights activist. He was helping us even long after the Civil War had ended. He was helping your family, my family, everybody's family on trying to become more prosperous in this country. And that's really cool. I think my Uncle William was a pretty cool dude. Yeah. All right, well, that ends our story time, y'all. And once again, my name is Samuel Still III. And just to let y'all know, we are the Sassafras Kids. Mr. Sequoia here. We've got Frechette Paulette. We've got Krista Clark. Myself, Sam Still. We got Terry L. Smith. And we got George Youngblood Berry. And we are the Sassafras Kids. We created this skit because we didn't think we'd get anybody's children over here to do sit-down children's time. So we came up with this whole ideal, and I think it might work. It seems pretty cool. And then what we're going to try to do is do other books written by African Americans and read their stories and do this every couple of months and just do a skit. I think it's worked out well. We've become friends with Don Tate. We'll be selling his book on our webpage. That's www.drjamesstillcenter.org, and that's drjamesstill.org. What we got going on right now, we're closed right now for the exhibits, but The grounds are open. You can come and walk the nature trail. And as soon as we get through this pandemic, we're hoping that we can open back up for tours and those kind of things. So we thank you for coming, taking your time out of your busy schedule to come check out us, the Sassafras Kids, and Miss Sequoia. All right. So be well and love y'all. Peace.
Thank you.